Connect. We're having some internet turmoil here. Well, that's just
with our
wonderful.
Facebook one. Looks like YouTube is up and rolling.
Okay, well, we'll just say finish that. Maybe it'll connect. Okay, hi guys. Welcome to our weekly live. We're doing our educational session. I think we may have to quit. We usually do Facebook and YouTube simultaneously. The Facebook is not functioning too well, so I think I'm going to click off on Facebook. Sorry, Facebook people. That's how that goes. So welcome YouTube people if you happen to show up. Hi, my name is Christopher.
I'm Angela.
It's Angela, and welcome to our Dinosaur Omelet page. This week we're talking about coop-raised chicken versus free-ranged birds. Pros and cons, which one's healthy? Is there myths surrounding some of these things? There are myths surrounding chicken facts. There's many a battle on the internet about chicken facts. So we're going to be talking about those tonight. If you guys have any questions, pop them down in the comments. You like questions? She likes questions.
Yes,
I
questions
like
are nice.
questions. We like to have inquisitive human beings. All right, real quick. Anybody new here? Can I give this long speech about who we are?
Sure.
It's a short speech about who we are. Hi, Chris and Angela. We're husband and wife. We're here in southern Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. We have a small homestead. And as you can tell, if you've been seeing us for a while, we focus a lot on the education, self-sufficiency, helping you guys perform and achieve your goals, to encourage human beings to achieve their potential. This is just one of those aspects. You know, we do a lot of things in our day-to-day lives. A lot of people, hey, I want to raise animals, I want to do food. So we try to help in that avenue. Here at our place, we raise jumbo Coturnix quail because of their proficient food production, their exceptional egg layers. I have a bunch of information in the description in these videos that you can click on that tells you how to start and raise these birds for food.
Yeah, they're specifically great for larger eggs for quail and then also meat.
Oh, yeah. Do we have any quail eggs hanging around here? No.
I don't.
Sorry, maybe I'll bring some in later. Yeah, they're really great egg layers. And Angela has her silky chickens, her Dino Puff chickens, right?
Yeah, and that's like a fun thing that we do for pets to produce pets for people, because silkies are just fun little fluffy pets. But also with our self-sufficiency topic, we do also have, of course, regular laying chickens for eggs. But we do have Muscovy ducks, which we like a lot. We just have a few birds, a drake and
These are our
3
personal
hens.
animals.
Yeah, we have
The
a
ducks
few
and the
breeders,
chickens.
and then they produce offspring, and we grow the offspring out for meat, which is a really good, lean, red meat, very similar to steak. So
Yeah, so that's what we do here as far as the business aspect of our little homestead. So there's a lot of people who watch these types of videos and they're like, geez, I'd like to make money on my little farm with, maybe it's a hobby. You have hobby animals, like, man, geez, I'd like to make money on my little homestead. What can I do? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. We do these, so our sales-wise, Angela sells her silky chickens. You can check us out on Facebook. She has a page called Dino Puffs. That's the name of her silkies because it's Dinosaur Omelet. Cross-marketing. Anyway, yeah, so she does that, and we sell our quail, right? So that's the business end of stuff.
and then of course we do
our-
education.
And we have a feed, so we also developed a chicken feed product. Do I have
right.
that? Oh, here. My little dinosaur. Delicious. It's great chicken feed. We hand mixed it here. Anyway, the whole point of that is if you guys have a yard and you're trying to make a buck with your critters, you sure can. I've done a lot of videos on that, on like organizing to have some goals to make your business goals. Maybe you want to start doing something if you haven't before. And yeah, so as far as generating revenue here, we focus on our quail and chickens and our chicken feed, and hopefully that stuff will keep growing. But I want you guys to, encourage everybody, if you're trying to do something like that, give it a try. Toss things out, see what's happening, do some research. We like to do these videos so people can be like, because there's so many scammers on the internet, you want to make sure, especially at this day and age, nobody trusts anybody. People get burned left and right with small businesses, backyard businesses. A lot of them they're not following licensors, they're not having any oversight or anything, so they're kind of self-regulating. And a lot of self-regulating organisms or institutions don't do very well, and they require outside regulation to function at a certain expectation. So, hey, we're trying to do that. So we do these videos, let people know we're actually legitimate humans who bust our sitting parts, work very hard to produce quality, healthy critters, and quality stuff. Okay? So I'm encouraging you to do that. I'm not trying to say, aren't we special, but in today's marketplace, it is a wise idea that you define yourself clearly and establish rapport with your audience, so they know, like, and trust you, and know to do business with you, and thusly will feel encouraged to leave a positive review for a positive experience with you. If that's your inclination to run your small business. Otherwise, we can move along. Is there anything you'd like to add after that long speech?
No, I don't think so.
No, I talk a lot. I didn't even have coffee. I wanted to do some exercise, but I did not. It's getting dark. Okay, so pasture-raised versus coop-raised. So today we'll be talking about differences between pasture-raised chickens and coop-raised chickens, talking about the pros and cons. I take notes on all these things, and I do a little bit of research so I can do this properly. And we'll focus on health, safety, and the welfare of the birds. Which of these living conditions is optimal? So let's define these. So when we're talking about pasture-raised chicken and coop-raised chicken, people have sometimes there's misconception. Do you want to discuss this? Tell them.
Sure. And this discussion has to do with farmers or homesteaders or normal everyday people. We're not discussing commercially raised, pretty much like chickens that are in concentration camp situations.
The chicken concentration camps.
Yeah, that's
just
not
go on
what we're
YouTube. You'll see a
discussing.
ton of them.
We're talking about pasture-raised, and that's usually chickens who spend a lot of the day free-ranging, either in a very large field. It could be fenced in, but the point is it's a big space, they're not limited, or it could be a space that's not fenced in. And they'll have a shelter, or should have a shelter, to go in with the elements, but they're not confined to it during the day. So they're free to eat and forage and find whatever they want in the grasses, the bugs, and all of that. And then the coop raised would be chickens that are confined, whether they have a large coop or small coop that, that's the setup of the owner and the number of chickens, and also a run. The size of the run, it's typically an completely enclosed space.
What's a run? Somebody might not know.
So
in chicken parlance, people use the word run a lot. We need a chicken run.
Yeah, a coop is the space that they go into sleep to lay their eggs.
Chicken house.
It's like a completely sheltered, safe from predators space. Usually it's not overly large. I mean, it just depends on the setup. The run is normally attached to the coop, and when the chickens are released from the coop in the morning, they go into the run, which is a space that's they're confined in the sense that it's fenced. It might have a roof, might not, but they can't go beyond the perimeter, and it's usually a stationary space. So typically the ground won't have grass anymore. It might have bedding, it might have dirt, but because they're always in it.
Bingo. Right. So these things, very correct, and these are important because the way you're housing and pasturing or running, how your chickens are being raised, it's going to affect their health, potential health issues, egg production, vibrancy, reproduction. It can affect quite a few of these things, and animal loss. So those animals. So pasture raising, like Angela was saying, is the natural way a chicken functions. So remember, all of our domesticated animals used to be wild animals back in the good old days, including the chicken. The good old days was many generations ago, thousands of years ago. But the modern domesticated chicken, they all come from the wild red jungle fowl, the Gallus, and we call these domesticated birds the Gallus domesticus. So anywho, chickens, they want to have in their They're evolved for their natural environment, which they've been taken from through domestication, which is to their benefit and to their detriment a little bit on both sides. But their natural behavior, obviously, is foraging from their forest days, back when they used to be happy, wild, crazy chickens, when they were much smaller, faster, spry, skittish, and would forage out there. But the biology is pretty much very similar. You know, there will be differences when you breed them, how they're structured, their food efficiency, etc. But their fundamental biology is the same as their wild, ancient cousins. And so that pasture raising and pasture behavior is beneficial for them, and it's very natural for them. In fact, I think we're talking next week on chicken environment. What is it? Chicken stimulation? Whatever it was.
I don't remember.
because the domesticated chicken still has a little bit of wild in them, just like a dog or a cat or any other animal that's been domesticated. So, understanding two systems, and we discussed that. So I broke these, reading off my notes. I get carried off. Coop-based living. Chickens kept in a confined enclosed structure, or the coop, your chicken house, the thing that costs a fortune, or you're trying to build, or you're looking for in the spring, or you get a cheap Chinese one that falls apart in about 3 months. Isn't that how they work?
Mm-hmm.
So the coop, in a coop-based living condition, they're in their enclosed structure where they're typically fed, and this is the important part, a controlled commercial diet, and they may have access to a small outdoor area run. So the controlled diet with a coop-based bird. So your difference is when you're raising your coop animal, they're going to have supplemented feed. Your wild pasture-raised bird is eating a more natural diet. The greens, the ground, the bugs, they're foraging. They're eating what they would be eating out in nature. They may or may not be getting sufficient nutrients from that, though. So you're probably still going to be supplementing them with a scratch. Coop-based animals, you're feeding them. They have to be fed. Okay, so you're going to be supplementing practically 100% of their dietary needs through a feed and scraps. All right? And in the summer, of course, you can pull scraps out of the yard, grass, greens, and other stuff and throw it in there. Or even do a limited walk. Take the animals and tractor them around in the garden, for example. Okay, oh, we had a nice note. Why do I always lose these notes? You know, I had comments. Here we go. Samantha said... Tom chat. I'm on the phone here, so hi, love the channel name, by the way. What's the typical cage sizes and ratios per hen? What's your winter housing preps? Thanks. And that's from Samantha Ambright. Hello, Samantha. I'm working on a phone, that's why I like jiggling. I'm trying to read off here. So what's typical cage size and ratio per pen? So we're talking about chickens or quail. I guess she's referring to chickens because it's pretty common.
Oh, well, that's what we're talking about. It really depends on the breed. Because their different breeds are larger,
energy level,
versus
sizes,
smaller, right?
Let's just pick the egg-laying breed like the Reds.
Yeah, I don't have the specifications.
We don't have it. So what do we have for our blacks?
Square feet.
You know
I don't have the official in numbers that I would want to recommend, but there's a lot of info on just Google, on the Google.
Yeah,
square footage.
Gosh, for
chickens,
I built so
standard size chickens. They do need a good bit of space because they are energetic. They are going to be eliminating lots of manure. You don't want the manure to build up if the space is too small. Also, it'll make it dirty, obviously, but acidic. You could risk respiratory issues, that sort of thing. If it's too small, the ventilation would not suffice the number of birds to keep up with. So it is important to have the right size.
Yeah, so if you're asking that question, I'm assuming, I don't know, that you might be considering getting chickens in a smaller area, which is common now. People are trying to raise chickens in a, townhome area or a smaller community, and they don't have a lot of space. So they're wondering, well, can I raise a chicken back here? What kind of space do I need? And that really depends on what your goals are. Yes, you're going to need some space. A chicken, you're not going to put it in a rabbit cage. It's going to need housing, usually few square feet per bird. What is it, 4 square feet per bird?
Yeah, I'm not sure. There are definitely consistent numbers online. Now there are people who go like extreme one end or the other end as far as having like excessive space or not enough space, but there are averages.
What you do not want to do, however, is provide too little space.
Right.
Too much space, okay, great. Hey, too much space is fine. You can work with it. Too little space, you're going to have a bunch of issues with the chickens.
Particularly health and boredom and potential temperament issues.
Yeah, so they can behavioral problems when they're limited to space. They start pecking,
They get irritated.
cannibalistic. They'll start biting at each other. All kinds of stuff, because that's not their natural environment when they're confined like that or squished in a small little area. Particularly around other animals. I mean, they're social creatures, but once they get into these confines, you know, it's like if you jam somebody in a box all day long, it gets pretty stressful for the animals. It's going to impact them overall with health. So, yeah, do your due diligence and definitely find out if you're thinking of doing that, the space requirements for the breed of the birds you're wanting. People usually in these situations are trying to get eggs, right? So you want to have 2, 3, maybe 6 chickens even in a space. So that's going to be a critical question that you want to have answered if you're dealing with limited space. That's the other reason we always talk about the quail as well. That's another option if you haven't ever thought about that. They do lay a lot of eggs and they don't need much space. It depends on what your goals are. People like chickens because they have personality and you can, you know, they're much more interactive than those little quail.
Yeah.
So,
And of course there's the standard size chickens, which is what most people think of when they're thinking of chickens, the egg laying or dual purpose. But there's also bantam chickens, and that's like a mini chicken, miniature chicken. They can be like half the size or even smaller than a standard size chicken, and their space requirements would be less. But yeah.
So moving on to this whole coop-based, I'm getting into the understanding these two systems. Let's talk about coop-based systems. Key components or characteristics of this is a limited space, particularly with the run. The chickens aren't going to have a huge area to range in, depending on the size of the run. But they're very active scratchers, peckers and scratchers. So any area you have chickens in will be tilled up pretty quickly. You may be, oh, it's a huge yard, right? I mean, they'll destroy a big area pretty quick.
It does depend on the breed. We have black Australorps, and they're very, they are bred to forage well. And they are strong. They have strong legs, and they'll tear up the grass pretty well. But other breeds, they might be not as aggressive with scratching, but yes.
Yes. Okay, so limited space, limited run. Pasture-raised, like Angela said. So our pasture-raised birds have a huge area to roam. They're going to be getting a lot of nutrients from the critters, the bugs, the roots, the things they're foraging for that they're doing all day long. I mean, if you watch a chicken, that's all they're doing all day long.
Yeah.
For hours and hours and hours. When we eat, you know, we have meals. So, and the reason I'm telling you, obviously, right? But the reason I'm saying that is because our intuition, the way we personify everything, we think naturally, I think subconsciously, we make an association, oh, the animals are hungry, they're going to eat. And then they're done their meal and they're just going to be, well, obviously not. You know, these animals are foraging all day so they can get their calories and their nutrients.
If they're foraging, then they're moving and they're using energy while they're foraging, so they're not, you know, just sitting around. But they have a crop where the food goes to the base of their neck. So the food, it's like a storage area for all the food that they collect in a day. And then while they're resting in a resting state, usually at night, they're going to be their digestive system is going to start working through that food. But the pasture-raised chickens, they're going to be moving around and exercising.
Using more calories?
Yeah. And then the coop-raised ones are going to be in a certain, you know, a limited space. So that exercise is not going to look the same.
Yeah, and I have, is that coming up later? No, that comes up later about the egg issue. So very simple. I mean, that's pretty intuitive. You guys, I'm sure, had a basic understanding that coop versus pasture, but there are some particulars that to keep in mind, which we're going to be discussing, which are actually coming up next. The health outcomes, health issues. So that's an important thing to talk about. Health issues with pasture-raised critters versus coop-raised critters. There's pros and cons to each. Man, my mouth is drying out like I ate a sock.
Well, Christopher already mentioned coop-raised domesticated animals, if they are in a living situation where they're fully dependent on us humans to provide their nutritional needs, then that means, like, for example, the coop-raised ones, they will be required to be fed proper food that supplies them the nutrition that they need for the day, for each day. And pasture-raised, they can look around and find a lot of what they need. They may need, depending on the setup they're in, as far as the foraging space, they may need some sort of supplement, but for the most part, they're going to be getting a really nice, varied, nutritional, gourmet food throughout the day. Yeah, and their diet.
That is a big, that's the primary issue. So like I said earlier, since we make our own feed, we did a ton of research into feed, diet, nutrition, and all this stuff for poultry, okay? And with the foraging, even with foraging, they may not be getting the required nutrients, depending on the area, especially.
Some people will rotate foraging or pasture areas. They'll rotate the large areas that the chickens are in to compensate for that sort of thing. And some people, they may not have the option. They might have a big field.
Yeah, but depending on what you want and how much you care about your birds, if you're feeding them and they're coop raised, you want to do your research, figure out an appropriate food or even supplements, something you can give them from the house so they get the diet they need, because you want to have them, you want to keep them healthy. You're spending all this money up front for their housing, for their fencing and structures and all that good stuff, and the birds, and maybe you put time into hatching or raising them from chicks. Be wise to give them some good food, the appropriate nutrients if they're not going to be getting it out in nature.
Yeah, and of course, consequentially, the diet is going to affect the quality of their eggs, the nutrition in the eggs that we consume, and obviously it'll affect their health, how their immune system is functioning, how their overall skeletal structure is, just their whole function of the body, but also is. It'll tell you, it'll produce nutrient dense eggs as well if they're eating properly. So, and they can eat properly in a coop situation if they're given proper food.
Just like us, we can eat white bread and bologna sandwiches every single day, and that's not very good for us. We may be getting our calorie needs, but we're sure not getting our nutrient needs. So do not give the equivalent of bologna sandwiches to your chickens every day. Give them a nice quality food. So what do we know about pasture-raised chickens? I think most people are not pasture raising because that requires a lot of space. And a lot of people in this homestead movement these days, they have smaller spaces. They don't have the huge area for pasture raisings. But what do we know about pasture raising? Because this is important. So these chickens are engaging in a natural behavior. So what does that mean? What does that mean? Well, they're getting lots of exercise. They're more active. So they do require a little more calorie intake, which hopefully they're getting from their natural foraging. Pasture, they may have better physical health, which means stronger bones and less body fat, less ectopic fat, less body fat in the chicken.
It's definitely easier for a coop-raised chicken within a limited space or confined space to gain weight.
And if you think about it, this should make intuitive sense. Your pasture-raised chicken is less prone, not that necessarily this is the case, less prone to stress, less cortisol in their body, less stress hormone, again, because they have stimulation and they're engaged in an environment. That doesn't mean your coop-raised chicken is going to be stressed out with a lot of cortisol because they're in a confined environment. The environment should be set up to address those issues, so they're not just...
you can set it up so that there's some interesting things for them to do, maybe some roosts or
play toys,
objects,
chicken toys, essentially, sticks,
areas they can explore.
And then change it around. You can come in, if you're raising them, come in every few days and switch things around, and it looks like a new environment. They're not the brightest creatures, so when they see like a new box sitting in there or something, that's a stimulant. That's a new variable for little chickens to engage with.
Some people like to hang foods, like hang a head of lettuce or cabbage so that they can peck at it, when it's moving.
Oh, that's good for them too.
Yeah.
So that would make sense. So they're having less stress, they're healthier structure in general. And these are, I'm going off of like some studies I looked up off of the internet. I don't know if I posted them in the notes. But they're, they were noticed to have a healthier overall countenance, their body health. But again, this is from, the studies were not very specific as to what the control group was, like the coop birds. But I know if you keep your coop animals properly, they're not going to have health consequences. They're not going to be in poor health. Just like we have people living in cities. They're healthy. They go to a gym, they eat right and exercise. Right? It doesn't, the area you're living in might be a bad example, but I hope that makes some sense.
Yeah, it just comes down to intention.
Okay, where am I heading on here? Controlled diet, confined systems, behavioral issues. Okay, so with the coop raising, what's the pros and cons of coop? And I think the big pro and con. So pro with coop. Your animals aren't going to get eaten up by predators.
Yeah, they're going to be more safe.
Yeah,
that is the main, I would say, is the main thing, is safety.
Yeah, they're
predators.
safe in the coop. They're not going to be getting hawks. Hawks come down, birds of prey, and of course the ground-dwelling predators. And if you're near a road, cars like to squish them. I mean, they go out in the road, and every once in a while,
they'll cross the road.
Some inconsiderate fool will run the chicken over, and the chickens are out in the street. So yeah, I think the biggest safety issue for free-ranging birds is just the wild animals coming around to
the hawks,
to get them. So if they're very beloved pets, you may want to address that.
So there are
some
ways to handle that free-ranging, ground-dwelling predators. Maybe if you're able to have a guardian dog, one of those livestock dogs. They are known to be really good for livestock animals outside, keeping them safe from the critters. Hawks, flying birds type things, having some sort of maybe netting. There's heavy duty type nettings that people can set up if they're in an area where hawks is an issue. So there are different things you can do, but
doesn't your one friend have one of those blow up?
Yeah, and it worked for a long time.
They got used
but
to
then
it.
They did get used to it.
Yeah, the predators will get used to your prohibitions and things.
I've even heard of people encouraging a murder of crows to stick around because hawks don't like the crows. So some people will feed them, and
feed the
encourage
crows.
the crows to stay around for that. But
all right, other safety issue for pasture-raised birds, potential pathogen. That's always an issue.
Yeah.
Potential pathogens, even for the coop-raised birds, but your free-ranging birds out in the pasture, they have a much larger swath of land where they're going to be exposed to, which means you have a higher probability of a much larger area, surface area for organisms to gather. And most of the organisms, the birds are hardy to. It's from their environment. The real issue is external infection, like a bird coming in or some other animal bringing their germs in and bringing them in a infectious load to an area where the chickens are pasturing and foraging, and then they can get an illness over there from that. Is that common? Not particularly anymore. Not any more so than a coop-raised bird.
It's
I would
definitely
say,
not uncommon
to
get parasite type things from wild birds, but coop-raised birds, chickens can also be exposed.
All right, now I'm going to talk about, so that was the pasture-raised animals, and I'm going to talk about the coop-raised animals, safety issues. So if you guys, particularly for that nice young lady, was it Samantha, asking about coops and raising coops. So the issue with coops is, Angela's talking about respiratory on this?
Yeah, so it's you need to make sure that there's proper ventilation inside the coop, but not drafty. So it's a big difference.
Now, when I say coop, now both of these animals have a structure they're going to be sleeping in, right? Okay, the coop. The pasture birds, they're probably not hanging around the coop and going in and out as much.
They may have like a giant shed. Some pasture-raised birds, people will have like electric fences that move around them, that sort of thing. But yeah, they'll have some sort of structure for sure.
Yeah. So, but with our coop-raised birds, they have their structure that they're going in and out, and they're tracking, and they're usually in their run. So their run is what? It's getting saturated. It's not grassy, so they're picking up more debris on their feet, and they're tracking it into the building. So like Angela said, this can start to instigate respiratory illness if the coop's not properly ventilated. You're having more stuff coming in.
And then while they're sleeping, they're going to be going to the bathroom too. So
Yeah.
manure buildup, obviously that would be something to manage and maintain. That,
Have to trust that.
Yeah, but that is going to affect the air quality in the coop.
And we always say, like, keep the things clean, keep the coops clean, give them a cleaning every once in a while, and make sure they're not getting soiled up, because that's when you start having that impaction of droppings and old straw.
Perfect space or perfect environment for organisms that are not good for chickens.
And then if you have no airflow, then it's just a moisture is gathering, and it's like you're running a biohazard facility down at the chicken house. And then they can get sick, and we don't want that to happen. So do be wary of that. So we talked about that. And as far as predator risks, so there's less predator risk with these coop animals with their run, but there's still a predator risk. You're still going to face the same kind of predator risk, I think, but you don't have the exposure region that these other creatures have. Your pasture-raised birds are walking in other animals' territories, like they're walking near the possum house, the raccoon joint, and near maybe fox dens. And these animals have big territories, and they sniff, and so they know where these animals are. Most of them are nocturnal.
The predators.
But they're predators, yeah. Most of them are nocturnal, but they're still realizing there's a food source that's coming around here, which are these chickens, and they have this larger area, so they're a little more at risk. Coop-raised birds, still at risk. You still have animals coming at night looking for free food over at the chicken coop.
So it's very important to make sure your coop, your structure, and the wires used, the wood used is all, it's strong, it has integrity, there's no weak points, there's no holes that are the size of a quarter or larger, because predators, minks and rats, snakes can fit through something this size. If they can get their head through it, they're going to get the whole body through. And raccoons can put their hands through. So, small holes.
Now, this is what I found was really cool about pasture-raised versus coop-raised birds. It was backwards from what I thought, which was egg production. I thought the egg production was going to be higher in the pasture-raised birds.
Because you're thinking like happy birds.
Kind of
and
natural environment.
Yeah, socializing.
Or at least even. But it turns out, and this was from a actual Cornell University cooperative extension study that suggested free-range hens may lay up to 20% less. 20% less, and I really guess depending on the breed they were measuring. Less eggs, fewer eggs than the traditionally raised confined birds from a coop system. And that's because of the energy being expelled and their foraging behaviors and the stimulation. They're stimulated, they're happy, they're foraging.
Distracted.
And yeah, they're distracted, and they're using their calories for movement. So they were producing 10 to 20% less eggs, which isn't a huge amount, I suppose. Like, gosh, once you have chickens and you get overwhelmed with eggs and you start giving them away. If you got too many chickens.
Usually people who have pasture-raised, that have the ability to do pasture-raised, they tend to have a lot more chickens than somebody in a limited coop space. They might have, 20 or 50 chickens versus 5 or 10. So they might not notice the percentage drop in eggs. But like we were talking about
it's just
earlier,
an interesting.
Yes, it is. It is. It's very interesting because it's counterintuitive, you think.
All right, and the eggs from the pasture-raised chickens are often found, and I'm going to have to argue with this a little bit, are often found to have a richer nutrient content, such as omega-3s, vitamins A, D, E. Those are fat soluble, right? A, D, E, and K, but A, D, and E. Anyhow, so why is this? Obviously from their free-ranging. But I'm under the suspicion, and it wasn't mentioned in this study that I have notes on, the bird's diet. So what are the cooped animals eating they're studying against? It was probably like a crumble, some other kind of like standard bird feed, which, yeah, they're going to have less nutrients because those factory feeds, they're not very nutrient bioavailable. They may be nutrient dense when they're manufactured, but once it gets into the digestive tract, the animal's not going to be absorbing the nutrients as they would from a more natural feed. We did a video on this a while ago. We did a video on feed absorption, feed type, as well as the anatomy and digestive system of your birds, so you can understand what's going on in there. Go watch them. They're actually pretty decent presentations on this information. Or put them in the background and just listen to it. So yeah, the nutrient density of the eggs of the pasture-raised chickens, people have a misconception. So they see, I just spit. You're looking at an egg and they're always like, oh, look how orange the yolk is. Look how red the yolk is. That really isn't indicative of much. And I know you're going to get mad. What are you talking about? It looks, okay, so we have our humans. We have taste perception. So taste is pretty subjective, okay? I might like something, you don't like it. It's exactly the same thing. We perceive the flavors differently. And why is that egg orange? Okay, so I think it tastes better because I'm seeing it. It looks orange. I think it tastes better. It may, okay, but why is it orange?
Strictly the color.
It's because it's full of carotenoids, like the carotenoid vitamin A. Okay, because they're eating, which is good, but you can cheat. And a lot of, what do you call it, store eggs, these businesses, they cheat. They'll add marigold or something into a feed.
Powder.
Yeah, to kind of diet almost. So you're getting a store egg and it's this red color, but it's not.
And they add that to the feed.
They add it to the feed.
The chicken eats it.
To give the illusion of a nutrient density, because we're seeing this deep red or orange color in an egg versus a pale yellow. And like, oh, this deep orange color egg is more nutrient dense. When in fact, it is just a little denser with that one vitamin because it was introduced to give it that color, to give it the perception of nutrient density. Which I don't want to get into nuance of it because it's extremely, I could go on for hours and hours and hours about it. That's why I said at the beginning, select a quality feed that you know is going to be substantive for the nutrition of the bird. So the bird absorbs the nutrients. Okay, there's a difference between food on a dish and food in our digestive system. Okay, especially on the nutrition label. Food on the nutrition label versus when we're eating it, because a lot's happening from here to.
So the nutrition label is like the raw ingredient. Is based on the raw ingredients. It's not factoring in any sort of processing of those ingredients. Like, for example, when you have a whole grain versus crushed ground meal, that process of crushing it is going to expose the interior parts of that whole grain to the air, oxidation, and then just it will start to degrade the nutrition from that ingredient.
A seed will last for many years, so you can take a seed and go plant it years and years and years later. They're designed to be stable. Okay, you smash it apart, obviously it's not going to grow, but when you smash it apart, it's no longer this little thing. It's this big area, this wide space exposed to oxygen and the vitamins in there and some of the fats. They're going to break down. They oxidize, so they're no longer.
Also, a lot of times, commercial feeds can be pelletized or even crumbled, and the process to formulate the food into a pellet or a crumble typically involves heat. So that introduction of heat on these raw crushed ingredients now is going to further degrade the actual nutritional, content of that ingredient. So like we mentioned in the beginning here, the nutrition label is based on the start of the condition of the ingredient, not the processed end result in the bag.
So like when we look at a pellet, and people like to get the crushed pellets or the pellets, because they're thinking, again, our intuition, it's everything in one pellet. So every single bite they have is going to be this homogenization of all of the ingredients in one. That's better. That's not true. Okay, that's not really optimal and that's not good. Chicken is going to eat like the foraging bird. The animal foraging in the field has an exceptionally healthy diet. They're not eating pellets that are all the same ingredients in one thing. They know what to eat. animals will treat themselves medically, really, with nutrition they need. They know what to eat
per
day, and they're going to select what they need to eat. The whole grains, we feed whole grains, and she actually ferments them to make them even more digestible. We feed them whole grains because the animals like them, tasty, they're fully nutritive, okay? And the animals are designed to digest the whole grains. We won't, okay? We humans, we're not designed to eat whole grains like that and digest them. The chicken is. Chicken has very amazing biology to digest its whole grains and use all the nutrition in those things, which are complete nutrition.
Instinctively, chickens will scratch around for grit, little tiny stones, and they'll eat the stones, and then the stones will go into their digestive system, into their gizzard. Their gizzard is like a strong muscle that contracts, so the food will pass through that gizzard where those stones are, the grit, and the grit in that muscle is acting like teeth in a way. That muscle is grinding the grit around the foods and then further breaking down what they're eating so that their body is pulling those nutrients from what they ate.
Our mechanical digestion is up here. Their mechanical digestion is down in here. And it does a great job. Okay, so we talked about the nutrient density issue. So if you have questions about that, put them down there. If you want to debate that issue, put it down there. I like hearing input. Moving on to practical considerations, moving into winter time, because that's coming up. Winter, gosh. So I'll talk about, do you want to talk about the food with the winter?
Yeah, we usually talk about the pasture, right? Like how, if you're in a climate where the weather is getting cold, maybe you have snow, or maybe just basic would be the plant life isn't growing anymore. It's more in a it's just,
their diet is disappearing.
Yeah, the bird's diet is disappearing.
Free-ranged or pasture-raised critters, I shouldn't say free-range, but pasture-raised birds, in the wintertime, everything's brown and dried up and there's no more bugs. So you're probably going to be supplementing their diet with feed anyway, at least a scratch and bird scratch or some other kind of feed supplement. That's an issue for them. And again, the same with predators in the winter. Their behavior changes because they're looking for food, because the predator's food becomes scarce too. So now the chickens are more at risk because the other animals are...
They're having to use that more energy to hunt and catch their food.
Catch their food. Some of them are having
babies
in the spring are coming, so they want to feed them. So they're going to be looking around for predators. So I always tell everybody in this time of year, change of season, fall, winter, double check your area, because there's going to be new predators. There's going to be new animals coming around that weren't there in the summer, simply because they too are getting a little hungry and peckish, and chickens are delicious. So with the pasture-raised guys, the food's dying off, the greens are gone, the bugs are gone. So they're going to need nutrition, nutritional supplementation through diet, through a feed. Shelter, again, I don't want to get in too deep into that because we talk about this all the time, winterizing your coops and stuff, and keeping, wind breaks. But that's the same for both these creatures, coop or pasture-raised.
And then some people like to grow some vegetables in the garden that are cold hardy, either for their family or for their animals. And there are a few different types of crops available that grow well in the cold that could also be supplemented for pasture-raised birds.
So simple stuff. I think this is just about does it. And the last thing I want to talk about with this coop versus pasture-raised birds, the cost consideration, because that's an issue for everybody. If you have big property, so I think pasture-raised birds, if people are pasture-raising birds, they've probably been doing that for a little while, or maybe they just bought a property. But most people, there's a lot of people who are new to the whole homestead movement past 2020. I went in. There was not a lot of research I couldn't find exactly what the specific statistic was on the rate of rural property acquisition during that period. However, there was a huge increase in the Google search engine for homesteading and homesteading related topics. And of course, yes, a lot of property did sell. So people are starting to do these birds and animals, and hopefully a lot of people dropped out. So I talked about that in one of our videos. Did the homestead movement die? Did it stop? Did it lose its gust? Because people got fearful and they started getting squirrely in 2020, and they're like, oh, we're going to become like Little House on the Prairie.
Didn't consider how much work.
How much work it was, a lot of effort, change of culture. You don't get to see your friends as much because you're putting animals in coops all the time and all that kind of stuff. So cost considerations with pasture-raised versus coop-based birds. So what's the investment in a pasture-raised animal versus coop-based? Well, coop and run. You're going to need a structure for either of these situations because the chickens need to sleep somewhere at night. You can't let your pasture-raised birds stay outside. They're going to get eaten. So,
and instinctively, they won't want to be in an open field. They're going to want to take shelter somewhere. If there isn't a shelter, they'll go for the shrubs
up in
and
the trees.
Yeah.
Which is still dangerous for them.
Yeah.
So either way, you're going to have, and again, you're spending a lot of money on these birds. You're keeping them. You're relying on them for a food source. You don't want them getting eaten. So there's always this initial investment of structures for either of these. So your coop, you want a quality coop either way. When I say coop, chicken house, it's really the same thing. It's almost interchangeable.
Yeah, the shelter.
Their shelter, where they're going to be laying eggs, right? So you're going to need a good coop. Your fencing, so the coop animals that have a run, you're going to want to have that. It's going to have to be fenced off. You don't want them wandering off and getting eaten or running into the yard or have the neighbor's dogs come get them. So you're setting up your fencing and then any other initial costs like your bedding, your water systems, etc.
And that is something with coops. There's more maintenance with managing the bedding, just the area, maintaining a healthy environment for them since it's a closed-in space, the run as well. But the pasture-raised, there's usually there's some sort of fencing involved, so there's a cost there for the large area. So a lot of people like to use those electric fencing that you can move rather, I guess, smoothly. But yeah, there's cost up front. But different types of cost.
Yeah, I mean, up here in the rural area, you see plenty of houses where the chickens are just walking. There's no fencing whatsoever. They're just roaming around the yard. But that's where you have...
But that's free range. Usually pasture-raised tends to be a larger flock of birds.
Yeah.
And then free range is usually like somebody in their backyard kind of thing. Or a small farm.
Yeah, I didn't want to get into the USDA definitions of these things with free range on the label, where it's not really what you think it is.
Right.
I'm not going to discuss that. Maybe we'll talk about that, because that could be a whole new subject.
But when you think of a pasture,
USDA,
of course we could get into the nitty-gritty of the definitions of things. But pastures tend to be large.
Initial cost startups. Coops, fences, and feed. So with your pasture birds, they're going to be eating a lot more in the field, and you're not going to be supplementing them as much in spring and summer, but they're still going to need feed in the winter because a lot of everything they were eating is gone for the winter. Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this has been real. I think that's plenty of information. Right?
Yeah. I mean, there's pros and cons to everything.
If you want to learn about feed, stop on by see this? This is our little Facebook page. I'll put it right down there for our feed that we made, and there's the grains. So I hope that's coming up. Yeah, different. So they're whole grains.
We feed our My Little Dinosaur feed to our personal birds as well. All of our silkies, our egg-laying chickens, and even our Muscovy ducks eat this. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and we had to formulate that from scratch. So,
and we worked with poultry specialists who focus on nutrition and also produce very good quality products as well.
Here it is, people. We take pretty good care of ourselves, okay? I cook all of our meals. I know how important nutrition is, like quality food. You want to have optimal nutrition for your body, optimal food for optimal health. So should the critters out there. And I'm eating their eggs and eventually their meat. So I want them to be eating as well as possible. So I don't want to feed them, less than quality. So I said, well, she's like, well, why don't we make our own food? So we did all that research. So now we know they're eating well. And they're healthy animals. We want the animals to be healthy, not lethargic, not getting sick all the time. Remember, when you're eating well, sleeping well, and you have taken care of your body, you're not going to be sick. Your immune system's strong. So you don't want your birds getting, illness from having a weakened immune system, from being stressed and dirty.
Increases their productivity, so they're going to be laying more.
So very, very important. Like, we all know that. I don't know, like, maybe people don't think about it for their animals. Like, I'll give my dog junk food because it's cheap. Well, I mean, yeah, but it's going to affect their health.
Yeah, you see the rise in all the
We got fat dogs
very
now.
bad health issues, cancers and stuff, just in the pets, and the cats and the dogs.
Yeah, so the food's important. It's nice if the birds can free range because they do get their natural diet, what their old ancient cousins love to do, go out in the forest and eat. But it's not necessarily a negative thing if they're eating a feed, as long as they're getting a quality feed. Just like I said, do the due diligence, do your research, learn about that. It's really fascinating stuff, especially if you're a nerd. We nerds love this stuff, and we like to learn about it because the science of it is really fascinating. But I think that'll be able to do it with coop versus free-range critters or pasture birds. And I guess that's that. Thank you very much for coming in here.
If you guys are new to our channel, please subscribe. And yeah, we consistently have live videos weekly, and
occasionally put up a pre-recorded thing. I like doing them.
But we like to do educational stuff, encourage you guys.
Yeah, the educational stuff's important. Thank you for the question earlier, Samantha. I hope you're still there. If not, thank you for coming in anyway. Other folks, it's been great. Facebook people who didn't get to see it, I'm sorry. It got shut down immediately, which was sad. And that's that.
Yeah, have a good rest of your day.
I'm gonna use my highly technical button-pushing finger and say goodnight.
Bye.
See you later.